There's a societal idea that eating disorders are just a white girl problem. This, of course, is not true. Eating disorders are serious mental illnesses that affect all people of all genders, racial and ethnic identities, ages, and sexual orientations. People of color with eating disorders are made to feel shameful, inadequate, and invisible in the ED space. Their stories are often hidden. Today, we take steps to change the eating disorder narrative. We are here to say, what about us? Hello everyone, I'm your host Maylene Arroyo, and welcome to the first episode of What About Us, the podcast where we shine light on the topic of eating disorders among communities of color. Today's special guest is Maggie. Maggie is a first-year student here at the University of Oregon. She is double majoring in philosophy and political science with a minor in legal studies. Maggie identifies as Latina and Mexican American. She's struggled with anorexia and bulimia. Maggie, thank you so much for joining me here today. How are you?
I'm good, and you?
I'm doing good. Thank you for asking. Okay, so just to get started, take me back to the beginning. How did your eating disorder develop, and what do you think contributed to it?
I think it began since I was a little kid because, my dad was very, very heavy on, fat phobia, something that's really common in Mexican households. So fat phobia was something that was very prevalent in my household, and, doing sports was something that, I was, hyper aware that, sports burns calories or sports makes you skinny. And I was super aware of, eating salads and stuff like that. So I wouldn't say I had an eating disorder then, but I definitely had, disordered eating maybe, or, initial patterns of eating disorder. And then it was middle school probably when, puberty started coming in, and I had just moved to the United States, and it was super different. And I was just super aware of, my body, and I always thought I was fat. I just remember I would always look at myself, and I was like, I'm so fat. Mm-hmm. I would just have really, disordered, bad patterns of eating.
So it started off first with anorexia.
Yeah.
And then it transitioned to bulimia?
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about your experience with bulimia.
In my senior year of high school, I actually had a friend who passed away, and as a result, I was, very into drinking. I did a lot of, over drinking to compensate, and I just remember one day, realizing how easy it was to puke to get, the alcohol out of you, and I just went down that road.
Something common in eating disorders is that people often believe that they're not sick enough, or that, there's nothing wrong with them. Mm-hmm. So what were your thoughts, when you were experiencing anorexia and bulimia?
I really feel like I saw my eating disorder as something healthy. I honestly remember thinking when I puked, I would be like, oh my god, I feel healthy now. Which is really weird because obviously it was the opposite, but I would just feel clean, healthy.
Yeah, eating disorders are a coping mechanism, for traumatic events that happen in people's lives. They start to fall into bad habits, and then that gives them the feeling of being healthy.
I feel like an eating disorder is a lot of lack of control, so you compensate for that lack of control by puking, or by you feel like your body's the only thing you can control in your life, and I feel like that's how it worked for me.
What was your family's reaction to your eating disorder?
My family actually never found out that I had an eating disorder. My mom had some kind of ideas because when I started bulimia, I really lost weight immediately. And she would ask me, she'd be like, what's going on? She always knew I did sports and everything, but I've contemplated telling my mom, but I really think it would make her really upset. I would say it's something she's tried to prevent, but she's also caused. I feel like personally, especially women, we tend to be oh, I'm so fat, oh, I'm so ugly, and my mom definitely is like that. Everything that you learn when you're little is what sets you up for life. I had those ideas in my head that being fat is bad. And my dad as well. My dad had an eating disorder when he was young too. Yeah, I really think eating disorders and bodies and stuff like that, it's something that's really prevalent in Mexican communities.
So if you were ever to tell your family what you went through with anorexia and bulimia, what do you think their reaction would be?
I feel like eating disorders are just so, sometimes having an eating disorder is seen as something good, something healthy. And I feel like my dad has that idea a lot, especially my dad. My mom's very aware of things like that. And then my mom, I feel like my mom would definitely be more upset, especially because my mom would always tell me, like, are you sure you're okay? Like, are you sure nothing's going on? And I'd be like, yeah, yeah. So she'd probably be like, oh my God, like, it was happening and I was right. And she kind of kept it, like, I kept it from her.
Do you wish you would have gotten any support?
Honestly, yes, I really do. Because I feel like bulimia really affected me. And I remember someone who actually also affected me a lot. I worked like in the front office of my high school. And the lady, she would like tell me like, oh, you're starting to look really good. And I would like take that as validation. Like I'd be like, oh my God, yes, like it's working. I look skinnier or I'm starting to look good. And now that I think about it, I'm like, no, like she probably should have thought about it the opposite. Like, are you okay? Why are you losing weight so fast?
Yeah, I guess some people would think like, I'm receiving a compliment, it's good. But you don't really realize like what someone is going through in their life and how that can influence someone. And like you said, that would give me like validation. Like I'm doing something right. Like because my life is so out of control, I have this one thing that is making me like feel worthy in a way.
And I feel like losing weight so fast is an immediate tell. Like it's okay to want to lose weight if you do it healthily. I feel like as long as you don't have the wrong intentions and you're doing it healthily, like you're keeping your body active and you're eating a good amount of food, and I feel like that's not bad. But if somebody's losing weight like immediately, I feel like that's like you're not doing it the right way, if that makes sense.
That's a sign, yeah. Kind of going into that a little bit more, did you exhibit any signs that like now looking back that you think would have been like obvious?
Probably, yeah. Like in middle school when I started being super aware of my body, like I would literally just have mental breakdowns about my body before going to school. I would look like at my legs and I'd be like, oh my God, like I'm so like when I would just have like literal mental breakdowns about my body. And like my parents would see it and all that, but it wasn't like, I feel like in their heads they just thought like, oh, she's being a teenager. And then when the bulimia started, I feel like that was way more silent because I knew that was bad. I feel like anorexia, it can just be seen in a bunch of different ways, but like bulimia is obviously like, no. So I was like, yeah, I know this is bad, but I'm not gonna tell anyone.
How did your eating disorder affect your like social life with friends?
I was a cheerleader, so I was just super insecure, and I felt like being surrounded by girls, and specifically, I feel like cheer is it's more than a sport, it's also something so social. I would just compare myself all the time when I would be with my friends. I always had friends who were thinner than me. I'd always be hyper aware of my body when I was like socializing with people.
Let's go more deeper into kind of the identity piece. I think a lot of people don't really understand how much someone's words like impact people. There's a lot of like judgment in Latinx culture, and I know especially like in my family there's like those like nicknames, right? And it's always based on your physical characteristics, which makes people more aware of how they look like.
My nickname when I was little was actually gorda. So it was just out of like cariño, but it really wasn't. Like when I think about it, I'm like that probably also affected the way I thought too. I feel like another thing that contributes to it a lot is that Latinos have this like ideology of like, no, suck it up. Like I feel like that's super common. It makes sense, it's generational that Mexicans are like, no, suck it up, stick it out, be strong. I feel like emotions and mental health and eating disorders, that's something that's seen as like almost not important. Like my dad had so many like mental issues, but they were never addressed because it was like, no, like depression isn't real, no, anxiety isn't real, eating disorders aren't real.
Yeah, like you said, mental health is super taboo in Latino culture. Like it's not talked about. Depression, anxiety, eating disorders, that doesn't exist in Latino culture. And so when someone is experiencing something like that, they get dismissed. And they often don't feel like they can ask for help because then people are not going to believe them.
I feel like now that like social media and like social movements, like being educated about things like that is more common in the younger generation, but like before it really wasn't. So many like Mexicans, like they feel depression, they have eating disorders, maybe even like sexual abuse, stuff like that. They're experiencing all of this, but they don't even know that it's wrong per se, or they don't even know that it's something that they can like receive help for.
Is there anything you still struggle with?
I would say definitely the idea of calories is something so hard. I find myself like whenever I eat anything, I immediately go and I'm like calories. And then I would say still body image. I didn't receive medical treatment, but I think when the whole thing with my friend happened, I did go to therapy. My friend committed suicide, and I had so many unprocessed traumas about suicide because one of my family members had attempted suicide a bunch of times, and when my friend passed away, I just like fell apart. I mean, I was like drinking all the time and then bulimia. So I feel like maybe something that did help was therapy, but I didn't really receive therapy to cope with my eating disorder. But maybe the fact that I knew how to like move forward with the trauma also helped my eating disorder.
I think sometimes for people, it's not about like addressing the food issues, it's about addressing like the trauma that like contributed to someone developing an eating disorder. Because I've heard this saying of like eating disorders are not so much about food, they're about a lot of other things.
I really feel like it's not. Like when I think about it now, I feel like now I have so much more like sense of like self-worth and like maturity about it, that like even if I gained weight, which was like my biggest fear and everything, like I wouldn't, it's not that I wouldn't care, but I wouldn't feel any less worthy because it wasn't about the weight really. It was just about, I feel like the weight is just like a manifestation of it, or like a tool, if that makes sense. Like a physical way of processing your emotions, I guess, or trying to process your emotions. So yeah, I feel like definitely I agree, it's not about the food, it's like about your emotions, and it's just trying to gain some kind of control over your life. Even like thinking back, like I don't even remember thinking like, okay, I'm gonna puke now. Like it was just an instinct. Like it's not like, okay, I'm gonna set the plan. I would literally out of instinct, and even when I would try to stop it, my body was so used to puking that I would like crave it almost. Like my body was like, okay, puke, like it's time to puke. It's such a like deeply psychological process that it doesn't really feel like a choice. It's not really a choice.
I think it's really amazing that you're here with me right now speaking about this stuff, because I know it can be really difficult for people. And I think it takes a lot of like acceptance to be able to sit here and say like, yes, I experienced anorexia. Yes, I experienced bulimia. So I want to, give you props for that.
Thank you.
But I'm also really interested in kind of the process of like you getting to a point where you could accept that you had an eating disorder and like understand it. So could you speak more on that?
Yeah, the process was definitely kind of hard. I feel like if you would have asked me this like a month ago, I probably would have like broke down because honestly, like we said, eating disorders are heavily tied with like events of your life. So when I think about like my bulimia and all that, I just think of my friend. Like that was just a manifestation of the loss of my friend. Yeah, I think I just got to the point of like a really big amount of like self-worth, I guess. It's something I'm kind of, I wouldn't say I'm proud of it, but it's something that built me. It's something that like I can just like really like have insight on now. And like if anybody were to ask me like, oh my god, I need help, I feel like I'd really be able to help them.
What would you say to another Latina who might be struggling with an eating disorder as well? What would you tell them?
I feel like I would just encourage her to change her mindset because I feel like that's the most important thing. The only way that somebody can actually change is by getting rid of those ideologies. So I would tell her like, I know you were raised with this and I know this is super common, but it's not normal. It's not healthy.
Are there any last things that you would like to share with us today?
I think I would just want to encourage anybody who's maybe like listening, maybe trying to get help, that even though it seems like it's the most important thing in your life, it's really not. It's something that really would like change, that really affected me, is like finally finding my purpose. So I think I would say try to find, your purpose, like try to find what you're passionate about, and once you realize like how much you have to offer like mentally and emotionally and as a person, your body means like nothing at the end of the day. It doesn't matter how much weight you gain, how your if your body doesn't look like the newest, body standard or beauty standard or whatever, it it doesn't matter because your body's just your body. You have so many other contributions you can make other than by looking good.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. That wraps up the first episode of What About Us. Thank you so much for listening to Maggie's story. If you would like to be a featured guest on the podcast, please check out the link in the description. Stay tuned for future stories, and let's continue to change the ED narrative. Your host, Maylene, signing off.